So we are continuing Egypt under the Pharaohs here. 17 from this Hymn of Victory. There's 25 here, but I came and thou smotest the subjects of their lords. The land of Mathan trembles for fear of thee. I make them behold thy majesty like a crocodile, the terrible one in the water. He is not to be encountered. I came and thou smotest the islanders in the midst of the great sea. Thy war cry is over them. I make them behold thy majesty as the avenger who appears riding on the back of his victim. I came and thou smotest the land of the Thuhin. The people of the Uthent is under thy power. I make them behold thy majesty as a lion with fierce eye, who leaves his den and stalks through their valleys. I came and thou smotest the hinterlands. The circuit of the great sea is bound by thy grasp. I make them behold thy majesty like the hovering hawk, which seizes with his glance whatever pleases him. I came and thou smotest the lands in front. The dwellers upon the sand thou hast fettered alive. I make them behold thy majesty like the jackal of the south, a hidden wanderer. He passes through the land. I came and thou smotest the nomad tribes of Nubia, even to the land of Shat, which is in thy grasp. I make them behold thy majesty like thy pair of brothers, whose hands I have united to bless thee. I make thy two sisters shed on thee health and welfare. My hands in the height of the heaven ward off misfortunes. I protect thee, my beloved son, the powerful bull who rose up as king in Thebes, whom I have begotten out of my lines. Gahota the Farcusper Musses, who lives forevermore, who has shown all love to my being. Thou hast raised my dwelling in long enduring works, more numerous and greater than they have ever been. A great gate guards against the entrance of the impious. Thou hast established joyful feasts in favor of Yemen. Greater are thy monuments than those of all former kings. I gave thee the order to execute them, and thou hast understood it. Therefore I place thee on the seat of her for never-ending many years. Conduct and guide the living generations. Now, her is Horus. The us is not part of the Egyptian form of the name. Hymns of praise to the pharaohs in the spirit of this song of victory were a favorite exercise of the ancient poets. Our modern languages are powerless to render the tone which pervades the songs of antiquity. A Homer remains Homer only in his Greek garb. The foregoing epic by the unknown Theban poet, the similar paeans in honor of kings Ramses the second and third. The heroic song of the poet Pentaur on the great deeds of Ramses the second during his campaign against the king of Kadesh and his allies will remain for all times unrivaled specimens of the old Egyptian language in its highest vigor. Only one of these songs, the poem of the priest Pentaur, has as yet undergone examination worthy of its contents through the exhaustive researches of the late Viscount Deroj, the victories of Jahotad Varkspur Mus III, who, during his numerous campaigns, brought the countries and cities of Western Asia into his power, to whom were subject Libya and the people of Nubia and Ethiopia, as far as the promontory now called Garda Fu'i, opposite to the south coast of Arabia, had brought to Egypt numberless prisoners of every race, who found their occupation in the public works. It was principally on the great imperial edifices, and among these the Temple of Gimmon, that they were forced to labor under the superintendence of the overseers, Rus, who had to carry out the orders and directions of the king's chief architect. In those days, a certain Fuam is named, one who has his mouth full of food, is of Semitic origin, was invested with his high office. Fate has preserved on the walls of a sepulchral chamber in the hill of Abdul Burna, in the region of the melancholy land of the Coffin Hill, Dunib Anks, a representation in which the artist has portrayed in lively colors the industry of the prisoners far more convincingly than the explanations written by the side. These curious drawings themselves enable us to realize the hard work of the unfortunate prisoners. Some fetch water in jugs from the pond hard by, others knead and cup the loamy earth. Others, again, by help of wooden molds, make the bricks or place them in long, well-arranged rows to dry, while the more intelligent among them carry out the work of building the walls. The words which are added as a I would think maybe the stronger or something, but the words which are added as a superscription to each occupation inform us that the laborers are a captive people which Jahota Nefer Kspur Mutsus the third carried to build the temple of his father Yemen. They explain that the baking of the bricks is a work for the new building of the storehouse of who's considered to be a god, Yemen of Apt, the east side of Thebes, and they finally describe a detailed manner the strict intendance of the taskmasters over the foreigners in the following words. Here are seen the captives who were carried away as living prisoners in very great numbers. They work at the building with dexterous fingers. Their overseers show themselves in sight. These attend with strictness, obeying the words of the great skillful Lord, who prescribes to them the works and gives directions to the masters. They are rewarded with wine and all kinds of good dishes. They perform their service with a mind full of love for the king. They build for Jahota Nefer Kspur Mus the third, a holy of holies for the gods. May it be rewarded to him through a number of many endless years. The overseer, Ra'is, speaks thus to the laborers at the building. The stick is in my hand. Be not idle. Well, the whole reward and punishment thing is definitely a start, but what about love and hate and whatnot? According to the contents of the preceding inscriptions, these buildings were connected with the Temple of Karnak. The one consisted in the building of a storehouse, the other erection of a saksum our most holy place, in which was usually situated in the innermost room of the temples, surrounded on three sides by a row of secluded chambers, in an inscription which covers an entire wall near the most holy place of the Temple of Yemen. At the apt mention is made of this building, while another wall, much destroyed on the upper side, gives us information concerning the good deeds of Dahota Spur Mas the third for Yemen at Apt and his temple there. It relates how the king dedicated to the temple as a perpetual possession various gifts for the different yearly feasts. Among these was a beautiful harp inlaid with silver and gold, with blue, green, and other precious stones, that upon it might be sung the praises of the majesty of whom was considered to be a god at all his festivals and under all his names. Next is mentioned how Pharaoh had given orders to construct numerous gates, subcut with locks of copper and dark bronze, to protect the Holy of Holies against unwarranted intrusion. Statues of the entity with the face of the king were executed by a distinguished artist, with the added note that the execution was of such a kind as no one had ever lived to see in this country since the time of the sun entity Ra. To this is appended the description of obelisks, in the erection of which silver, gold, iron, and copper were not spared, and which now are reflected in their splendor on the surface of the water and fill the land with their light like the stars on the body of the heavenly female entity Nut. In like manner, the impression produced by the obelisks of Queen Hatshepsut. Okay, how do we say Hatshepsut? Oh, Hatshepsut is Ra-Ma'at-Ka. Okay. Is described in an inscription on the base. The woman king Ra-Ma'at-Ka, the gold among the kings, has had these obelisks constructed as her memorial for her father Yemen, Thebes, inasmuch as she erected to him two large obelisks of hard granite of the south. Their tops are covered with copper from the best war tributes of all countries. They are seen an endless number of miles off. It is a flood of shining splendor when the sun rises between the two. A statue of the successor of her, that is, of the king, a beautiful sacrificial table, and several altars are added to the previous works. May other gifts follow, such as a large jar made of copper, 7 cubits high, and many kinds of utensils of silver, gold, and iron. In his 15th year, on the 27th of Bacchans, the king ordered a completely new establishment of the property of the temple. Among other things, the temple was provided with a number of foreign people from the south and north, among whom were children of the kings of the land Ruthin, Canaan, and of the southern Kenthenfer. Gardens and 1,800 acres of arable land in various parts of Upper and Lower Egypt were assigned as permanent property of the temple. The contributions also in vegetables, wine, birds, beasts, and so forth were fixed once for all. The number of the temples of the entity, his favorite abodes, in other districts of the country were carefully designated, and the sacrifices in them were, in like manner, granted with royal generosity. In a word, the king did more than all his predecessors from the beginning, and proved himself a complete master of sacred knowledge. The artists in useful works found here their special employment. Their remarkable works are chiefly gates, the names of which may be read clearly on the spot at the present day. Of one particular part of the temple it is written, "The king found it in the form of a brick building, in a very dilapidated condition. Being the work of its predecessors, the king with his own hand performed the solemn laying of the foundation stone for this monument." Thus the temple was restored as a new building. The several dwellings of the entities in it, they were called naos by the Greeks, were carved out of the monoliths with new doors of acacia wood. In these were placed the statues of the entities as the statues of his ancestors, the kings of Upper and Lower Egypt. I would want my burial in a house of worship. After the building had been constructed in a position corresponding to the four quarters of heaven, the great stone gateways were erected. The first had doors of real acacia wood covered with plates of gold fastened with black bronze and iron. These were placed the full name of the king in copper, gold, and black bronze. The whole was shut off by a splendid beacon or winged building, propylon on both sides. 3 gates were connected with it. The first bore the name Gate of Jehotemus, Jehoteneferkesper-mus the third. He glorified the greatness of Yemen. The second was called the Gate of Jehoteneferkesper-mus the third, lasting is the great gratitude of Yemen. The third, finally, the Gate of Jehoteneferkesper-mus, a great spirit, is Yemen. They were covered with plates of pure copper, and the sacrifices were brought in through them. The most important work, both as to position and execution, was the Qasem, or Suksum, the Holy of Holies, a favorite place of Yemen, built of hard stone of the Red Mountain, at Cyan. Thus, the building rose, and then followed the thanksgiving of the priests, which the sequel of the inscription recites in poetic terms. He gives to thee his kingdom, the crown shall be placed on thy head, upon the throne of her. The remembrance of thee as the king of Egypt shall be lasting. To thee has he given over the united world in peace. All nations bow themselves before thee. We have heard, says the courtiers of the king's court, bringing welfare. Thou breathest in a pure life. Thy majesty is set upon the exalted throne. The judgments of the Divine One himself are like the words of the sun entity Ra at the beginning of all things. The king, flattered by the praise bestowed upon him, insists with pleasure on his services to the entity. This building, which was executed in his temple, shall be a remembrance of my good deeds in the dwelling. I shall remain preserved in the history of the latest times.